Wetwork Media presents Dan Lauer's Post Meridiem, an unreliable memoir of madness in Los Angeles. Part 3, Anxiety, Chapters 1 through 5. I had an inkling. I had a flash. I suddenly thought I knew what it was that had killed Marilyn Monroe. Spalding Gray, swimming to Cambodia. The deal was that if we lost at the Indian casino, we'd make it in LA. I'd never hoped to lose so much in my life. John and I left Phoenix at about 11 on a Monday night, pointed the headlights of our cars west on the 10, and said a silent benediction that we were making the right choice. No friends in LA, really. No apartments, no jobs. Just 2 cars full of shit and about $2,500 apiece. Oh, and the dream. Somewhere over the California border, we stopped to get a little break from the road at some huge, gaudy Indian casino set back on a mountain. A huge purple pulsing searchlight on the crest of the building's roof flashed at the heavens, dragging angels down to cash in the nest egg on just one more hand. We both took crisp $20 bills out of the ATM and then played the slots. I was bleary-eyed and barely there. He was more together. It was cold outside, and it was nice to be out of my car for a while. We ordered club sodas with lime wedges and sat smoking at the slot machines, feeding quarters a few at a time, spending $1.20 and then another. We won nothing on our slots. We carried our cigarettes from one machine to another, talking about whatever came to our minds, completely exhausted, and still with a long day ahead of us in the city. This was a waste of time, I said. He shook his head. Nonsense. What's $40 for the story? What story? I asked him. He fed the machine another quarter. Come on, man, this is something else, right? We're finally doing it. In the middle of the night, pulling off on a whim at a casino, blowing $40 we don't have. And look at these people. Keep your eyes open. Got to be a story here. We're moving to LA. We moved on to the video roulette wheel, and after a solid 40 minutes of heartbreaking up and down struggle on the machine, up and down, we hammered back our sodas, tamped out our cigarettes, and headed for the door, totally busted out. We were both wearing smiles. A surreal moment like that is just the sort of thing I'll always remember. We're young and stupid in a fairly visionary way. We may be poor, we may be dreamers, we may be naive, but it could be worse. We could have mortgages and alimony payments and ungrateful children already. We're that age. I know people. I can remember thinking when I watched my breath drift up toward the sky and little Mobius strip patterns on the frigid air that it was better at that moment to have nothing as opposed to already having fucked things up. Odd comfort, but I'll take it. It had been 27 minutes already. What the fucking shit was taking so long? I'd already abandoned my bed because they admitted another man who was in really bad shape. Horrible shape. A gnarled monster revision of a former human being. I felt sorry for him. He was not aggressive. He was terrified. There were voices telling him to kill people. His thoughts were echoing off of each other. He couldn't focus or sleep. It had been like that for weeks, he told the nurse. Poor bastard. They dosed him with Haldol just like everyone else, and he was nodding out in a few minutes, struggling against it. Sitting perched on the chair like a dog awaiting his master's return, popping his eyelids open every few seconds. He died in the fields, master's never coming home. I was about to get sprung, so I gave him my bed. That's just what a sane person would do. I was still playing the part and sitting on a chair just to the right of the nurse's desk. I was bouncing both legs, watching Dr. Comrade as he filled out forms and wrote in my chart. The nurse, a pretty blonde, smiled at me from time to time. Not much longer, she mouthed at me. I nodded. That's fine. Jamie left about an hour before. He had to go without his chain, around which he kept his wife in a little leather pouch. He wasn't happy about that, and the staff called the police. He was arrested, and this time he was not going to the hospital. He was going to a lockup. He'll be there until he makes bail, and then he'll go off his meds, start freaking people out again, and wind up back here. Then they'll take something else from him. This system is so broken, but I'm not nearly smart enough to figure something else out. Leave that to the doctors so they can take their cues from the politicians. Round and round we go. Another nurse exited the fishbowl and walked over to me. She smiled. She's got bad news. My heart sank. The doctor is writing you a prescription for your meds. It'll take about 3 hours to fill. Can you just sit tight? She asked. I was about to lose it. But if I did, I'd be stuck there for longer, days, maybe weeks. So I took a breath and slowly gathered myself back into a neat little pile of nerves. Can I just be honest with you? I asked her. She nodded. Of course. This place is breaking me. I can't take it anymore. Write the prescription and give it to the pharmacy. I'll wait. I'll get a coffee. I'll take a walk, get some fresh air. But please, I can't stay in this room anymore. I need to get out. Please. My eyes began to well with tears. Please. She nodded understandingly and smiled at me. I'll see what I can do. I looked around the room. I couldn't believe I'd been there for so long. I needed to get back to the real world. I had to get out of there. I was so scared, so scared. I was watching the fishbowl like it was a movie I loved. And I saw the nurse and Dr. Bald talking. She was explaining something. He was listening. He was thinking. He shrugged and nodded. I felt a grin creep across my face. This is good. Very, very good. I am the Cheshire Cat. Have you ever seen a grin without a cat before, Alice? The nurse came back into the blue room and smiled at me. It would only be a few more minutes. All I felt was excitement. I wonder what it's like outside today. I wonder what that first cigarette will taste like. I wonder what the fresh air will smell like. What day is it? Sunday? Monday? How many people will I have to face on the way out? I don't care. This is how the three cons at Alcatraz felt right before they sloshed into San Francisco Bay. Sure, maybe I'll drown, but I won't die here. I'll die on my terms. I'll die free. Or maybe not. I have a good chance here. I'll be a grown-up. I won't fuck it up. Maybe I'll make it after all. A few minutes later, they were dumping my personal effects onto the desk from a large plastic bag. Keys, wallet, all my credit cards, discount cards, business cards. A single condom that must have been expired, a loose cigarette, cell phone. There was also some change. I put it all in my pockets. It all fit. This was everything in the world to me right now. I had to sign a few forms before the orderly led me to the door in the back of the room. Before that, the blonde nurse grinned meekly at me. Good luck with everything. I appreciate it. I stepped back from the desk and waited for the glorious moment when the locked door would swing wide and I'd be able to breathe the air of a free, reasonably sane man. Take walks, she told me. People who take walks do better than people who don't. And remember to take your meds. She smiled at me again. I nodded at her and stood behind the orderly who waited patiently for me to follow him. I did, and he used the key on his belt to unlock the door, and it swung open, and we stepped into a corridor and began walking towards the lobby. You have a prescription to fill at the pharmacy for 3 weeks' worth of Prozac, Geodon, and Restoril. It'd be free for the time being, you being indigent and all. Indigent. A word I'd long hoped would never be utilized to describe me, but I have to admit is currently apropos. I have no income and also must be fired from the job I'd held as a paid fundraiser in a huge, horrible, communist block-style building right off Wilshire. I stopped going to my shifts a full week ago with no explanation, no email, no calls. That has to be grounds for termination. Also, expect a call from the San Fernando Mental Health Center in the next few days. They're a facility for indigent mental health patients. There's that word again. They will set you up for refills on your medication and also provide psychiatric and therapy services. You will also be able to apply for food stamps for a short time. It will be expedited because of your situation. I thanked her as briskly as I could without sounding rude, snatched the paperwork out of her hand, and started jogging toward the lobby doors. There were more important matters at hand than my mental health and medication. I couldn't get outside fast enough. I had one cigarette. It was dangling from my mouth. All I needed was a light. I had to find a light. When I stepped out of the hospital's sliding glass doors, to my immediate left, there was a gated area where two people sat smoking, talking about this and that. The man was tall and had long gray hair, wore a shirt with a wolf stenciled on it, Cherokee scene. The woman, years younger than the man, carried a case full of makeup and wore clothing tattered and torn after years of neglect. They both looked tired, a matching set. I wondered if they just met or went way back, but it made no real difference. I walked up to the man, cigarette dangling from my mouth, and asked him for a light. He obliged, handed over a shiny, new-looking Zippo, and I lit my cigarette. The first inhale after days on the wagon. Glory washed over me, tingling immediately in my extremities. The pain is going. Are you visiting someone? He asked me as my eyes rolled back and a smile curled on my lips. Or are you leaving? Sure, I said, the first one. My friend is very sick. He frowned, a genuine frown, and suddenly I felt slightly guilty for lying. The woman, who was now sitting on a bench, looked at me empathetically. Well, we hope they get better, she said. They do know each other. Funny, I thought. I was just thinking the same thing. I took another slow drag and endeavored to savor that cigarette for as long as I could before heading back inside and finding the pharmacy. I had a few more cigarettes in my car, but the one would suffice for the moment. It had been nearly 72 hours since I'd smoked and my head was swimming in nicotine. I could barely stand. Joy. There are no words in the English language for that high a smoker gets after a long gap. Usually after a sinus infection or bronchitis, which is usually brought on by smoking in the first place. One of the many things we all do each day without thought for the damage we do to ourselves. But that's beside the point. The feeling was magical, vibrant, engaging, stimulating, verbose, cacophonous, melodic, excruciating, hyperbolic, lusty, euphoric. I found the pharmacy and got in line. There was only one man in front of me, so I was assuming it wouldn't take long. I told the clerk my name and she found my prescription. Then I waited. I waited for days, weeks, months, eons. The man in front of me wasn't content with receiving his prescription and fleeing the pharmacy like it was a crime scene, as I was planning to do. No, he had to give this poor pharmacist his entire medication history. This medicine works, that one does not. He already talked to his doctor about all of this. Why doesn't the pharmacist know? Did he not talk to the doctor? He's gone around and around. He's done his research. He has lots of questions. I'm so close and yet so far. That is the story so far, no? Aggravation and impatience began to build. I was standing there seething at the back of his head, boiling with hatred, fantasizing about all the ways I'd like him to die on the way home to his empty one bedroom and a cat that hates him. I stared at a point on the back of his head I'd like to punch, sure that, even in my weakened state, I could send him flying over the counter, landing at the feet of the pharmacist who would calmly hand over my prescriptions with a wink and a smile. And I could then saunter out whistling, a champion. But I waited. Patience. Patience is one of the new things I do. I felt greasy and was having trouble standing. The nicotine did a real number on me. Some people would take that opportunity to quit. I was halfway through the week it takes to partially kick a habit. I was not thinking that. I was wondering where the closest gas station was where I could quickly secure 3 packs of Pall Mall Blue 100s and smoke them all on the 45-minute journey home. Finally, the prick in front of me was done, and I could get the meds. The pharmacist smiled at me. Have you taken these before? Have any questions? His face reminded me of some sort of twisted, Stedman-esque cartoon rendering of Geppetto. I nodded. Oh yes, I know what I'm doing. This was only true in one very narrow sense, but it was sense enough for him. He handed me the prescription and I headed to the bathroom. I took a piss as a free man, then headed outside and bummed another light and a smoke from the tall gray man. He and the younger woman were still at their post, keeping watch in the smoking area. "How's your friend doing, man?" he asked as he held the lighter up to my cigarette. "Still sick," I said, and began walking toward Lot C. I remember where my car was, even after all the trauma and ugly spiritual violence of the last 72 hours. I was across the grass. I was smoking and walking, and the breeze felt exquisite as it kicked up and washed over me. I basked in it. It was nothing but atmospheric pressure differentials. High pressure, low pressure. All the science of it rapes the majesty of its effect on my face at that time. Cool, calming, perfect. I retrieved my cell phone and turned it on. Only one power bar left. I'd been gone for 3 days. People had questions. I got a text and a voicemail from everyone I'd ever met, it seemed. Word had spread like a virus. "I hope he pulls through," the tall gray man shouted as I reached my car. Delayed reaction or hallucination? It matters not. "Right, yeah, me too," mumbling to myself. That would be a good thing. At that moment, I can remember thinking of this little spot outside where Johanna works, where she and I hang out after she gets off in Burbank. It's an alley, and for some reason, there's a little step under the wall. It serves no purpose, but we sit on it anyway, and we smoke, and I try to make her laugh. She has this great laugh where she squeaks at the beginning of it, but it's only when she laughs hard. You have to work for it. Sometimes I tickle her above the knee. She claims to hate it, but I don't believe her. And it's always late when we're there, and there's always a breeze, and we have a good conversation and get closer and look at a huge American flag that waves from the roof of a high-rise across the street, and I always smile when I think of those moments. They are silent, amazing beacons in the night reflecting off of each other and tamping down the bright blue of this room. I feel special there. I feel wanted there. I'm happy there. My thoughts are constantly returning to her. Obsession, compulsion, hatred. I don't believe this is all the result of that night between her and John. It could have been anything that kicked off this series of events. The more time passed, the worse the depression got, the smaller the catalyst would need to be. 6 months down the line, it could have been a stubbed toe or a particularly long stoplight. I turned over the ignition and headed for my apartment. I knew it was going to be a long drive. That was okay by me. I owed myself a couple of double cheeseburgers and a Diet Coke. I owed myself a lot of cigarettes with the windows down and the wind kicking ash all over my seats. I owed myself a real chance for a change. When the doctor called, I'd make an appointment, and I'd wake up on time, and I'd remember to take the meds. I wouldn't drink. It won't be that hard. It's not too much to ask. I loaded my home address into my GPS and started onto the highway, and put my earbuds in and scrolled through the contacts on my phone. I had some people to call. I needed to let everyone know I was all right. I guess it'll be my family first. They deserve it after all these long years. They put up with me the most. They managed to love me somehow, some way. Then, everyone else. I'll call everyone in turn and have the same conversation over and over and over again. I just wanted to pretend the last 3 days never happened. Simple enough. Just pick up where I left off. Why, yes, I just spent 75 hours at the local CVS. It is open 24/7, and I simply can't decide between the Astroglide personal lubricant and the self-warming KY jelly. These decisions are, after all, very important to a virile heterosexual such as myself. They'll never buy it. I hadn't gotten laid in months. More? Shit. I couldn't remember. But that was my own fault. I'd done all I could over the past few months to make myself unattractive, unattached. I'm no good at intimacy. I'm broken. This is the way I want it. But still, for some reason, I can't think of any other product at a pharmacy I might take 3 days to decide on. I hate the way Astroglide smells, but the term self-warming conjures images of my penis bursting into flames. I have the typical American sexual guilt, but I am not a masochist. My mother answers eagerly after a single ring. Dan, I am so worried about you. She was right to be worried. I was too exhausted and drugged to know if I was feeling better. However, my mind was not occupied in toto by thoughts of suicide and crazed paranoia. I think that means progress. I think. I'm doing much better. Are you really? I mean, really? Forget about upsetting me. That's something I simply cannot do. She gets very upset about these things very quickly. It can aggravate me at times, but then that's how you react when you think someone you love may be dying. In those moments when I call and give her bad news and she goes completely sideways, I roll my eyes and get angry and start having to confront her. I think that's unfair, and that it would be a much more concerning thing if her reaction was mild and without emotion. I'm not 100%, but I'm getting there, and I'm going to try. I promise this time. You promised before. I know you're not doing it on purpose, but that but hangs in the air for a long moment. I nod because I know if I speak, I'll begin to cry. Can't have that now. I love you, Daniel. Please go home and get some rest and call me soon. Another nod, a mild grunt. I love her too. The weather is extremely mild today, the thermometer barely easing over 75 degrees. There is a hectic breeze whirling through my car. All of the windows are down. Elliott Smith is on the radio, an obvious holdover from my mood on the way to the hospital. I switch the track to a new playlist, and Beck's Gamma Ray blasts through the speakers. That's more like it. I had just finished 2 double cheeseburgers and was working on a Diet Coke. I stopped at a gas station and bought a pack of cigarettes. I waited for the clerk to hand them over gratis. But it seems as though that was a one-time deal back in Los Feliz. I was chain-smoking as the sexy British voice in my GPS coaxed me home. Left turn ahead, said my sultry Hala 9000. You seem tense, Dan. Perhaps a deep tissue massage? Maybe later, I sigh. I don't want to be touched right now. You have some serious intimacy issues you need to address, Dan, she retorts in her sexy British twang. I regret setting that voice. Seemed like a good idea at the time. She's a fucking know-it-all. Perhaps Daddy didn't pay you enough attention. You lost your virginity too young as well, Dan. Oh, that tears it. Oh, sure. You know everything, right? If you knew shit, you wouldn't be a fucking box. She needs to take a hint. Just keep the directions coming and save the platitudes for someone who gives a fuck. I am smarter than you, Dan. I tossed my cigarette out the window and lit another. I didn't want to argue with my GPS. I am British. I frowned and sighed. That's a fair point. I eyed my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked like shit. Merge left. Aye. Just one more thing keeping me on schedule, setting the rules. Time for vitals, time for breakfast, time for meds. No phone calls longer than 5 minutes, no shouting. Hands where we can see them. Merge left. It's not that this isn't totally real. It's just not as totally real as it appears to be at the moment. My apartment is the bottom unit of a 2-duplex building nestled tightly behind a house. You can't see the building from the street. Total seclusion. The upstairs neighbor is never home. The Armenian family in the house out front is pleasant and accommodating. The apartment was becoming a de facto home for a time. I figured I'd be there for a few years until something broke and I made it big, buying an ironic former porn palace somewhere in the hills, far from the other famous people. Maybe staying in Glendale. That would confuse the other Hollywood elite. There's just one problem at the moment. This isn't my apartment. It can't be. It looks identical and the blinds are open so I can clearly make out the Pink Floyd poster on the wall of the living room, my bedroom. But somehow I've taken a wrong turn and have ended up at a mirror image of my apartment in some other dimension. I am standing outside the driver's side of my car, leaning on the open door, looking at the duplex building over my sunglasses, trying to figure out what is wrong, what is making me uneasy. Then they switched apartments on me. Bastards. That was fast. Wait, no, I think. We're not giving into those thoughts anymore. Time for another dose of Geodon. Stat. I grab what I need from the car and cautiously approach the apartment doppelganger, finding it impossible to shake the feeling that it isn't really mine until I unlock the front door and step in. Small but comfortable. Ah, yes, this is the place for sure. I love it here, or at least I did. I went mad within these walls and don't know if I'll ever feel the same about it. My positive tenure there is a distant, vague, hazy recollection now. I can't focus on it. I park in the street and wander down the long driveway. Standing just inside the apartment, I can hear that John is having a conversation. I say a silent benediction to no specific deity that John is on the phone. But then, in a grisly moment of complete terror, another voice answers, clearly coming from inside the apartment. It's a voice I know but can't place. Being confronted with people right now wasn't part of the plan. I need to be alone. I need to get some sleep. I don't want to talk. I wanted to be invisible. I felt such shame. I didn't know why. I step into the kitchen and am greeted by John and his brother Bob. Bob is an affable kid in his early 20s. He's very much the white thug life archetype. But he's self-effacing and relatively funny. He makes me laugh. He sees me and smiles. Damn! What does the other motherfucker look like? I just shrug. What are you doing here? He leers at me. I adjusted my inflection so it doesn't sound quite as menacing. I mean, what are you doing here? Just rolling through, on my way to the bay, but keep it on the DL. I'm supposed to be in Portland. I nod and shrug. Who the fuck would I tell? He gives me a one-handed shake bro hug and shrugs. People talk. He moves to the bathroom and closes the door behind him. John is standing at the sink doing dishes. He's wearing black slacks and a buttoned white shirt. He's either on his way to work or just getting home. Hey, buddy, he smiles at me. I'm on my way to work. Thank Christ. Just get through these next excruciating moments. You'll be alone soon. How are you, man? He continues washing the dishes. This is an awkward moment. I should have told him I was going to the hospital, probably. I would be confused and hurt if I were him. I think. I don't know right now. I can't get a line on his mood. He looks tired, like I feel. I am tired. I need to be alone. I have to get some sleep. Okay. John pauses for a beat and turns the water off. He turns to me and folds his arms. Want to talk about it? I shake my head. Who knows? I ask. Ashley? I refuse to ask about Joanna. I will not bring her up to him. If I do, the red flashes in my vision will begin and I will start fantasizing again about disemboweling him with a kitchen knife. The brother is there, so I'd have to make quick work of him too. Then off to the hardware store for a pickaxe, a shovel, and a few bags of lime. Then a frantic blitz into the desert to plant them both in places no one will discover, until condominium development stretches hundreds of miles past the mountains. He nodded and shrugged. Ashley knows. I mean, she was around. I had to tell her something. Joanna doesn't know anything. Motherfucker. He's lying anyway. Despite my conflicted feelings about him and the state of our friendship, and in spite of the psychoactive drugs coursing through me, I attempt to look at it from his perspective. For weeks now, his roommate has been clearly depressed and raving incoherently about conspiracy, and then one day he returns home from work, and his roommate is just gone without a word. No note, no voicemail. First, he must have wondered, and then after a few hours, what? Panic? Relief? Out of the picture finally? Joanna knows everything. I can see it in his eyes. Okay, fine. Maybe I have some explaining to do, but surely not now. Surely he won't demand that of me. When did Bob get here? This morning, he says, drying his hands on our cheap 99-cent only store dish towels. He's on his way out with me. You look like you could use some sleep anyway. They are both kind enough not to poke holes in the situation, for the most part. You get laid in that place? Bob asks. Fuck you, shut up, John snaps. What, man? It could happen. Chicks dig the thoughtful type, sad and funny, 1-2 punch, chick killer. I shake my head. You dating anyone? Bob asks me. John and I made eye contact. No way to deal with the question, not just then. We let it hang in the air. No. What about that Johanna girl, huh? You was like spending every minute with her. John told me a few months back it was taking up all your time. You were in it to win it. God damn it. Yeah, right. Shit, man, call her right now. Hospital, all crazy and shit. Use it. Get some pussy. He really leans on it. Pussy. That's what this situation means to him. Pussy. Sometimes I wish I were Bob. Sometimes, but not often. No better word for him but simple. Only skin deep. What a joy it must be to exist right at the surface, to never dive deep into the id or the subconscious, and to only deal with the then and now. Must be bliss. I wonder if at night, when the lights go out and Bob is alone in bed, his mind begins to race like mine does. I don't think so. Rather, he drifts into a sound slumber the moment his head makes contact with the pillow, and he doesn't dream and isn't surprised and disappointed to awaken the next morning. Pussy. I do my best to pretend to laugh, but I feel protective of her and the remark stings a little. A lot. I swallow it, let it go. He doesn't know, can't, wouldn't. They both leave the apartment and I sit on the front stoop and light a cigarette. My head is throbbing. I finish smoking and head inside. My air mattress is in the living room, all made up, inviting, and comfortable looking. I pull back the covers and slide in, clothes still on. I close my eyes and feel relaxed and ready. I'm going to sleep. My mind is easing to a halt. This is going to feel so good. At long last. My phone's ringtone is a piece from The Rock 3, an intense movement. There's bad timing, and then there's bad timing, and then there's this. I hate text messaging. There's no soul to it, no inflection. I refuse to abbreviate or use slang. I'm a snob, or pretentious. I don't know which term is kinder. Maybe neither. Before I headed to the CVS and had my little nervous breakdown 3 days ago, Jean, back in Orlando, texted me because I told her I was having problems with my stomach a day earlier. We had the following text conversation. Jean, how are you? How's your stomach? Dan, I don't know. This is bad. I'm in trouble. I don't trust anybody anymore. Jean, what? What do you mean? Dan, this is so embarrassing. I can't take it. I can't do it. Jean, I really think you should call your parents, really. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. I never responded. Next thing, I'm in the hospital and on lockdown for 3 days. Now my phone is ringing and it's Jean calling. Shit. That was really unfair of me. I answered the phone. Are you okay? Where have you been? I've been worried. I thought something had happened. I was going to try to get in touch with your roommate. She is hiding her panic like I would expect her to. Jean and I know each other fairly well, but we have a phone relationship. It began in person in Florida, but even when we were closer in proximity, we got to know each other on the phone. We are both night owls. I hate talking on the phone, but for some reason I can hack it with her more often than not. I speak to no woman the way I speak to Jean. There is no sexual threat on either end, and we've never crossed the platonic threshold into any territory that would complicate a friendship between a man and a woman. It's a relaxed interaction, and we react to sickness and pain similarly. It's easy to relate to her. I can actually stand it right now. I can even make the occasional joke. I explain the situation in detail and spend nearly 3 hours on the phone with her. I thought I wanted to be alone until I started talking, and then I realized I had some things to get off my chest. I make a lot of jokes about suicide, but she won't laugh. After each bit, I ask her if it's too soon. Just a little, she replies every time. Jean is infamous for being a total ice princess. She has been known on several occasions to cut me off in the middle of a thought or point to wonder aloud what color to paint her toenails. Sometimes, when I'm wrapping up an anecdote, she'll go quiet, and when I press her to tell me what I was talking about, she'll tell me she doesn't know because she was thinking about making toast. This doesn't happen now. Now, she's wrapped in my every word. Now she's concerned. She's maternal and kind. She's willing to let me get some of it out. I'm glad for it. I need it right now. While I'm talking to her, I wander around the empty apartment. I smoke a lot of cigarettes. I lay on my bed. I get comfortable. I let my armor down. I listen to her talk about what's going on in her life. I am amused by it. I feel like being amused right now. I think I broke a guy's brain the other night. How? I'm not sure. I think you probably are. Well, we've been on a couple of dates, nothing serious. I've known him for a while, right? And I know he's got some family issues, so we go out to dinner a few nights ago and we sit down and order and get to small talk and I bring up his family. He literally jumps up from the table and, without a word, runs out of the restaurant. Why? I don't know. Again, broken brain. I don't get it. I don't think there's anything to get. He just didn't want to talk about his family, I guess. Jesus, that's fucking weird. Have you spoken to him since? Oh, yeah. He came over to my place and went down on me later that night. This made me laugh so hard I couldn't catch my breath. Once I did you come? He's not very good. Must be the broken brain. We continue from there, always getting close to the hospital situation and circling back to minutia. She has sympathy but doesn't pity me. I talk about nothing in particular. I make lewd and harmless sexual comments. I ask her to send me a tape of her and some of her friends having a pillow fight or showering together. What are you going to do now? She asks as the conversation is winding down. We're both running out of things to say, and I'm getting extremely drowsy, and I can't stand and pace the room anymore. So I lean against the wall, knees bent at nearly 90 degrees. Oh, I don't know. My words feel heavy. I'll have one more cigarette and try to get some sleep. I think that's a good idea, she tells me. Get some rest. I'm really glad you're going to be okay. Thank you, I say. Really, for everything. Shut up, queer, she sings at me and hangs up. I stepped outside and looked at the chain link fence in my backyard and watched the neighbor's dog pace in his kennel, and I lit yet another cigarette. My throat burned. I needed to stop smoking so much. It was a breezy day, and the sun was hanging low in the sky. My eyes were burning with exhaustion. Suddenly, my pocket was vibrating, and I fished out my phone. Joanna, are you okay? I pressed the reply key and froze, stared at my phone's keypad, and suddenly my eyes were fixed with a wide-angle zoom lens, and I was 1,000 feet away from the alphanumerics that never made any sense in the first place. I had no idea how to respond to that question. Would a yes suffice, I wondered? And then, well, am I okay? What does okay feel like? For my 26th birthday, Joanna told me she was going to kidnap me for a few hours in the afternoon. I tell her that is fine with me. Ever since we met 5 months before that, we've been telling each other how much we wanted to go to the Cheesecake Factory together. Have a nice dinner. Dress up a bit. We both obsessed over it, despite it being just another hypothetical foray into a bland, nationwide chain eatery. Making plans to have some cheesecake and then breaking them at the last minute became the refrain. It was just one of those things that developed organically and strangely. And should you confront the other person with, how did this ever become a thing? Both you and they would be all shrug. She picked me up at my apartment around 1 in the afternoon on my birthday and we went driving. Talking about whatever, laughing, smoking. One of those moments in your middle youth when you're still able to ignore anything outside the moment in which you're existing. Birthdays don't mean much to me, especially now that I'm older. Just another day. But Joanna made it feel special. She made a big deal of it. She sang to me. I was clearly desperate for her attention, and this was my fix. Then finally, we parked a few blocks from my apartment. Where are we going? I asked her. She smiled coyly. The Cheesecake Factory. I was excited for the bit to finally, at long last, pay off. My birthday happened to fall on Easter Sunday, so we were not by any means the only people with the Cheesecake Factory brunch idea, and we waited about 30 minutes for a table, sitting on the lip of the fancy fountain in the Glendale Galleria, smoking and hiding like children, sneaking wine coolers whenever a security guard wandered by. Public smoking was strictly verboten. California is rough on the smoker. Then we were seated. We had a great meal and a great conversation. It was that elusive birthday lunch with all the pomp and circumstance two starving artists in their mid-20s in that town could manage or even hope to strive for. And then our waiter returned and asked us if we'd like dessert. No, Joanna says. None for me, but he'll look at a menu. Our waiter smiled at me. I shook my head. No, actually. I don't like cheesecake. I thought you did, I tell her, looking from her to the waiter and back. Joanna frowned. No, I can't eat it. I'm lactose intolerant. Our waiter, stubbornly refusing to find this all as excruciatingly charming as it obviously was, excused himself to give us a moment to realize the full gravity of the situation. For months we'd been playing a game, Joanna and I, one without form or rules that could be followed with any consistency. At no point was either of us sincere vis-a-vis our desire to partake of the cheesecake, and yet we still worked the bit, long and hard, lamented the fact that we hadn't been yet, feigned anger over broken plans, and then there we were on the day of my birth, celebrating both it and the purported resurrection of the Christ, and realizing for the first time that we'd been living a delightfully shallow lie for almost the entirety of our friendship. Oh, there was laughter. The nightmares are vivid and horrible, so I wake up every few hours sweating and afraid that I'm back in the blue room. Boris and Jamie in a narrow corner carrying slick shivs and medieval maces, swinging clumsily at each other in gladiatorial fight to the death. Jamie screams about God and the devil, and Boris wonders aloud about his mother and brother, while Mary bellows into her pillow, and Gloria jabbers at one of the orderlies who is busy shining his heavy leather boots. I might never wake up from this. Maybe this dream has become the reality. Maybe my reality has always been a dream. I just want to quiet my mind. I just want to sleep soundly. I fell asleep when it was light out, and now I awaken and it's dark. That is always an unsettling sensation. It's been this way for me for years now. The exact opposite of the norm. Fall asleep in the light and wake up in the dark. Totally twisted and backwards. The digital clock on the VCR says 3:30 ante-meridiem. I feel like I haven't slept at all. Did I get home from the hospital yesterday or the day before? I can't remember. What is the day of the week? What is the date? Am I here all alone? I get up and perform my due diligence as far as the paranoia goes. There's no one behind the shower curtain, no one in the closet, no one under my roommate's bed. I sit on the toilet with the lights on and sigh. What now? What is that feeling? Ah, yes. I'm hungry, so I go to the fridge. The kitchen laminate floor is so cold, and so is my body. I stare at the contents that lay behind the open door. Condiments and butter. That's it. No food. Has anything ever said, here lives two guys in their 20s so aptly? I find a box of saltines in one of the cabinets and take them back to my bed and begin to eat them sitting on top of the comforter, legs crossed and in total darkness. Have I learned nothing in my life? No crackers in bed is day one shit. After much deliberation, I finally tell Joanna I am okay via text and ask her to call me when she gets back to town. She promises she will. Back to town. I somehow forgot I was in LA because when it came right down to it, I wasn't. Just this apartment. It was the entire universe to me. When things were good, I never had an excuse to be bored there. If nothing's going on, I can be a tourist for a few hours, put a few gallons in the car and head down to Heart Attack and Vine. See the Hollywood sign, check out the hookers on Sunset, get stuck in West Hollywood at the oh fuck you traffic light. Only one car per green. Oh, it's fucking sinister. But despite my current proximity to the shit of it all in the City of Angels, I'm too exhausted and too crazy to look for anything to do. It's late. I could maybe find some vampires on the stroll in Burbank, perhaps get arrested for smoking on the streets. I have no ambition or motivation to do anything at all. I could read a book, but I don't want to turn on a light. I could watch some TV, but I don't want to retrieve the remote. I could try to masturbate, but feel incapable at this moment of even that modicum of self-love. I may never feel capable of it again. I don't think I want to live in that life. The worst orgasm I've ever had is far and away better than the best anything else. Did Woody Allen say that? Or Groucho Marx? Is there any difference? Then again, maybe it's a Yogi Berra malapropism. But what is the substitution? I'm even confusing myself now. Keep it simple. Pardon me while I have a strange interlude. Memories of the Marx Brothers watching movies with my brother in the living room. I can remember staying up later than we were allowed. I can remember waking up excited and buzzing at 4 in the morning on Christmas Day, only to have to watch a movie or read a book for 2 hours before my parents would wake up. I remember being a child, but I feel like I've been an adult my whole life. Was I ever young? Was my whole life ever ahead of me? Middle-aged people tell me I have nothing to worry about after all. I'm only 26. No, I correct them. I'm already 26. A whole life gone and nothing to speak of. For shame. I suddenly recall for no good reason the first stanza of a song I found scribbled in one of my notebooks. I somehow doubt I wrote it. It was in an unfamiliar hand. They cured all his ills at the local market, and though he knows pneumonia is not smart, it is good to have the symptoms but not the disease. So he took a walk today, out in the rain, because the pain of the fever puts his poor mind at ease. I may have finally figured out what it means. Then again, maybe not. I have the pain of the fever. I have the symptoms. The test results aren't back yet, though. Maybe. I can't be sure. I may be a human after all. I wonder when John will be home. He works as a valet at a big hotel on the Avenue of the Stars. Last week, he parked the car of someone famous, someone you'd know. Since he's been working there, he'd take a stack of his business cards, tacky headshot and all, with him every night and drop one on the floorboards of every car he parked. Just playing the odds. He figures if they narc him out for it, he can just say they fell out of his pockets. It's a good plan. He's an actor. He's trying to get noticed. I'm barely aware of it, but my eyes are beginning to close on me, losing focus on the room. Then flashes of the recurring nightmares are dancing on my eyelids, makeshift screens, and I'm awake again. The nightmares, there's nothing I can do about them. My subconscious is obviously trying to process the events of the last 3 days. I remember it all, except what I don't. Maybe I'll deal with it properly in due time. Maybe I'll write it all down and try to sell a book. Maybe I'm really that self-centered and solipsistic. A moment later, I awaken with a loud snore, sit up sharply, glance anxiously around the room, and then fall back onto the pillow, still frantically dry humping the notion of that exquisite dreamless sleep that never seems to come in just that perfect, oh, so simple way. For some reason, I think of fucking my second girlfriend in my '96 Jeep Cherokee in the parking lot of a Burger King in Ormond Beach, Florida when I was about 16. I can hear her head bumping against the headliner and feel her panties dangling from her left ankle working against my thigh. I can taste her skin. I can smell the soap in the restaurant bathroom where I went to wash up post-coitus. For some reason, I regret that entire experience at the moment. Barely a week has passed since I was released from the Blue Room. I am not feeling any better yet. I've been taking Prozac 2 pills once a day in the morning just like I'm supposed to. I've been getting out of the house and taking long walks, just like the blonde nurse said, wandering around the grocery store a few blocks down where there is free air conditioning and no one looks at me cross when I keep weaving in and out of the frozen food aisles pretending to decide on an ice cream flavor. Will it be butter pecan or moose tracks today? Oh, fuck me. How are these decisions supposed to be made? Yesterday, the employees of the local Albertsons relentlessly menaced a local homeless man. I recognized him from the area. He looked about 300 years old, impossible, sun-bleached and broken, and was always wearing a heavy flannel shirt, parka, and cargo shorts with sandals, no matter the weather. I was trying to check out in the express line, just getting a pack of cigarettes and my bottle of Diet Dr. Pepper, and I saw the whole thing. He had popped a bottle of Mad Dog he'd seemingly retrieved from thin air in the beer aisle and killed half of it in a single gulp. He's standing by the huge 24-pack Pepsi display and eyeballing the exits, wondering if he can make a break for it and duck past the line of chongos blocking his escape. He decides against it and begins to panic. "I'm sorry," the man says. "It won't happen again. amigo. I was just a little parched. Third time, sir, says the huge Hispanic manager. He towers over the rest of us. We have to take action now. Sweet holy Jehovah, if I was an Indian, I would swear that was war talk. There's gonna be a showdown. The checkout clerk, a pudgy Armenian woman with male pattern baldness, asks me if I managed to find everything I needed. This sounds more like a philosophical inquiry into my progress than a customer service question. What are you driving at? What do you know? She shrugs, confused, and rings up my 2 items. The bum stands, hands in his pockets, eyeing the phalanx of the crack squad of Albertson's internal shrink prevention guard. They amount to a sad comment on the state of commerce. All he wanted was a drink. Here are the Latter-day Spartans, Pablo, Mickey, and Tiny. I walk away, but wonder if I should have stayed for the mad dash to the exit, knocking over the Frito-Lay display, crunching all the Doritos, screaming and thrashing in pain. It's a hot day. The sun seems to be refusing to move from its position directly overhead, no matter how the minutes and hours tick by. I walk the block and a half back to the apartment, listening to the sounds of the street. People walk their dogs, couples amble together, clinging to each other, looking peaceful and content. I was not peaceful and content. I was whatever the opposite might be, a tinderbox of fury. I feel such anxiety. I'm too old for this meandering angst. Most of my time is spent on my air mattress, either ignoring the television or looking up at the ceiling. Silent self-reflection is becoming my full-time job, and I'm beginning to feel incredibly disgruntled, verging on postal. I tell you this, brain of mine, we're not going to figure this out on our own. I desperately want to jerk off, feel the endorphins explode in my brain and groan that relief and pleasure, fall back onto the bed, hazy and glowing post-orgasmic bliss. Alas, no can do. Not even worth a half-hearted effort. It's the depression or the Prozac Geodon cocktail or both. Who cares and what's the difference? At night when it's quiet, my brain won't stop running simulations at faster than light speed, constantly replaying in front of me on a 100-inch screen, and in 3 devastating dimensions are scenarios, conversations, painful events from the past. Now, surely, is the time to set things right, even those that had not been set wrong to begin with, and may, indeed, not have happened at all. The introduction of antipsychotics and therefore a certain level of freedom from the extraterrestrial has allowed for a minimum of clarity, but not quite enough to let bygones be bygones. Not just yet, anyway. If you're enjoying Post Meridiem and just cannot get enough of a good thing, it is available for pre-order now as a beautiful ebook available from Amazon and Apple Books. The ebook version of Post Meridiem includes additional content, illustrations, and even an additional 5th part not included in the free audiobook version. Search for Post Meridiem and Dan Lauer on Amazon or Apple, or visit wetworkmedia.com/post-meridiem for more information.